What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And we have juror interviews from Lori Vallow Daybell's trial. They reached a guilty verdict after only 3 hours of deliberation. And we want to know why. We know why we think they did it. And I've seen some clips of it, but this is a full video of, I think, 3 different jurors that are interviewed and give their thoughts. I haven't watched it in its entirety. I just figured let's watch it together for the first time, for me at least, get our immediate reactions. Were they thinking what we were thinking? What did the prosecutor do to really push them in that camp? Or what did Lori Vallow herself do to push them into the guilty camp? Let's get through it together. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Here we go. All right, so this literally seems to be on the courthouse steps, which is very interesting. And a couple things that happens in some of the clips I saw is I'm not sure the jurors were like ready or knew they were going to get interviewed, but here it is, and they do get interviewed. And let's take a look at what they had to say, because even the small clips I saw seemed to give pretty good insight as to what that jury was thinking and what they were doing, and maybe why it took the time that it took. So let's take a listen together.
Walking out now, knowing, I think you're knowing how high profile this case was. What's going through your head?
Sadness. It's sad. Oops, I'm sorry. It's just sad that, this has happened to Charles, and she's given up her life as well. It's sad.
What did you think of her defending herself? Anything that went through the jury's head with that?
Well, for me personally, I thought, what does she have to lose? Guilty or not guilty, what does she have to lose?
She's got a lot to lose if you don't know about the other cases, right? So like, now that you know about the fact that she's already got multiple life sentences, sure, we all knew she had nothing to lose as the public that knew what was going on. But if you're sitting in there and you think this is the only charge against her and she's pushing for self-defense, she's got everything to lose.
So were any of you folks aware that this woman had already been
I had never been
convicted
heard.
of
I have never
3
heard of her.
homicides?
Yeah, no,
And
I've
the
never
jurors
heard of
did
her
not
before.
know that.
No, I did not.
And nobody brought it.
And ma'am, would you want to come in and talk too? Do you want to say anything?
Just there's a lot of backstory here, and this woman had already been convicted of 3 homicides, and they obviously didn't want you folks to know that. Nobody knew that during your deliberations.
No.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Wow.
What was this experience like for you? It was sad. Like
This is another juror. That's why I think there's 3 altogether. We get from that initial male juror, from this juror, and then I think another juror as well.
as he said, for me, it was the text messages that did it as far as evidence.
I think nobody can be surprised about that, right? Before we got rid of Ned, let's be like Nephi, right? Do it for the mission. The text messages, Lori's own statements came back to damn her, and that is very common. And we're talking about in the Karen Reed case, one of the big differences already just a couple days in, they are playing a lot of her own statements. And you can see how powerful that can be to a jury, especially when a defendant doesn't testify. And that is what did Lori Vallow in, which is pretty much what we expected, so no surprise there.
And I feel like we uncovered some lies.
Knowing now that she was
Uncovered some lies, which, if you remember, an opening statement, and the prosecutor did a good job to point it out in closing argument, that what Lori said in opening was not facts. They were not evidence. And it did not come to pass. And some of you guys mentioned did Charles bat left-handed or right-handed? So they went back, and in those 3 hours they deliberated, if there were some people on the fence and they start pointing out Lori Vallow is a liar, so if she's lying about that, what else is she lying about? That can also be a big deal. And that's why when you catch a witness in a lie, or a defendant in a lie, more importantly, you highlight it and make sure the jury knows it. And the prosecutor armed the jury with those text messages and those lies during closing argument. So if there was anybody on the fence, the jurors that were in the guilty camp could pull those jurors in with what you armed them with as a lawyer. That's what closing arguments are all about.
convicted of killing her 2 children in Idaho.
I haven't had a chance to Google everything. I'm sure as soon as we get on the shuttle. So might have more to say later.
Was that difficult going through this and
Yes,
not being
it
able to be
was.
disconnected?
Yeah.
What
It
do
just
you
felt
think-
like there was a lot of information that didn't make sense and that was missing.
Do you think
It was obvious to them that there were things that didn't make sense, things that were missing. I also kind of appreciate her comment there. She's like, did you guys know about what she did to her kids? She's like, well, I want to go Google it and stuff because just because somebody says it, I don't want to jump to conclusions and make my opinions now. So I'll probably have more thoughts later. I think that's a very sound, reasonable answer to that question because it's like impossible. How do you change your reaction immediately? You just convicted somebody of the worst crimes, and now you're finding out all this other stuff. How do you even respond to that?
Think she did herself any favors by
No.
defending herself?
No,
You were not impressed with her lawyering skills?
no.
What did you think of her behavior during cross-examination? The way that at one moments she was argumentative with some of the witnesses.
I mean, many days she just was like smiling and laughing and didn't seem to take anything very seriously.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we saw. It's like not a good time to giggle, not a good time to joke around with a witness or to laugh about a pronunciation. It's your life on the line. Your husband is no longer with us. And no surprise, she didn't think a pro se defendant did herself any favors, right? We tried to highlight the few times that, oh, maybe that was okay. She did all right there. But when you represent yourself, it very rarely goes well.
Were you hoping to hear how much of that did that play into a factor in the decision?
It did.
Were you hoping to hear her testify? Were you hoping
Yes,
to hear
I
her
was.
testify?
I was.
And what about you?
I didn't understand why she didn't call anyone.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
So that's always gives me a little cringe. I wanted to hear her testify. That's fine. Most jurors do want that, but I don't know why she didn't call any witnesses. It's like, is that burden shifting to the defense a little? I listen, these jurors are just being honest. I think they're doing the absolute best that they can. But and I think that's probably honestly what a lot of jurors do think when they're sitting there and listening to the trial. Now, hopefully they understood, even though they wanted her to call witnesses, she does not have a burden and they can still understand it. But even the fact that they're thinking these things tells you where most lay people start out when they walk into a criminal trial.
Or why she didn't have, I know she made a statement about the only family that was interviewed was her estranged brother, and why wasn't her parents or her sister, but yet she didn't call them.
That's the problem with the defendant, right? Criminal defense attorneys can point out that the state didn't do X, Y, or Z. That is a hole in the evidence. That is a gap in the evidence. If you can't convict because of that, I don't have to call them. I don't have to do the state's job. But a lot of jurors are like, well, why didn't you just call them? Instead of putting that burden on the state to call everybody that's necessary, they're like, well, she didn't call them either, so no harm, no foul. Not really how it's supposed to be. But again, not hating on them. I appreciate what they're saying. I appreciate learning from them. And as a defense attorney, we have to deal with that in trials. If I'm a prosecutor, I have to make sure they know we pulled all the evidence that was relevant. So if we didn't call them, it's because they weren't relevant and we didn't need to call them. But as the defense, you have to argue they were relevant and they didn't call them. So that's on them because that's a hole in the evidence, a gap in the evidence. It's not my burden to call them. And a defense attorney probably would have made that argument in closing.
So,
I mean, in saying that, she is not obligated to prove her innocence.
exactly. Yeah.
I love it. And he's like, but listen, we knew she's not obligated to prove her innocence. Kudos. And the other juror agreed with her. So good. These people are not professional jurors. So the fact that they're having this dialogue and having it in their head, they probably had it behind closed doors. I appreciate that. And they're doing the absolute best they can.
And you gave her that benefit of the doubt. She recognized she didn't have to put on the defense.
She knew.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
she knew.
Was the fact that she didn't put up a defense or take the stand in her own defense part of your deliberation at all?
Did it
It was
affect
all evidence. It was all evidence that was produced
Yeah.
and presented to us.
Sorry if this was asked. What would you say the biggest piece of evidence for you guys as a jury was when you came to the decision?
Well, for me, like her, it was text.
The
Texts
text
were damning.
history.
What
Texas?
what
Can you
specifically
tell
about
us
the
which one?
text?
Oh, there were so
I don't know
many.
if I can do that. Yeah, there was.
I mean,
there
we
was
had
two of them for
pages.
me that really stood out.
Which ones?
There were two texts for him that really stood out. Let's hear what they were.
The
Um,
Nephi.
Yeah, that was one of them. Soon you will be Nephi, and so will I. So
Soon you will be Nephi, and so will I. That was one of them. Well, turns out they believed Adam's description of Nephi, I guess.
that was one of them. But I don't know if I should say anything else.
We heard so much about
I don't know if I should say anything more. That's one of the clips I saw earlier where it's like he wasn't so sure, like, should I be interviewed? Should I say this stuff? Because he wants to protect that verdict. And I appreciate that. That should be tantamount. That should be the most important thing in these jurors' minds. We did our job. Let's not do anything to screw it up and, say the wrong thing because all these people are firing all these questions at us. We're not professionals. We just tried to do the right thing.
about dark spirits and religion and how this all plays into it. I mean, as a jury, what's going through your head when you start hearing that in court?
For me, that didn't really play a big role because
He says it didn't play a big role, but the Nephi text was really important to him.
you have to have evidence of conspiracy, and that is not evidence of conspiracy.
Interesting. So the dark spirits of religion, you have to have evidence of conspiracy, and that is not evidence of conspiracy. I wonder if he's going to tell us what evidence of a conspiracy he did find.
Was
Say
it-
somebody
Was it unusual for you guys to see, I mean, you're talking about her brother Alex, the guy who actually did.
So it's a different question. We're going to change gears, it seems like here, but I like the way this guy thinks. He was really considering everything before he just went in there and voted guilty. So I appreciate the way he thinks.
That was the trigger. But so many players were referenced in this trial, and you never saw them and never heard
Correct.
from them. That had to be confusing when
It
you
was
guys got
very
back in the jury room. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very confusing.
What did how
It
did
just felt like there was so much of the story that was missing.
So a lot of that usually will come back negatively for the prosecutor. If there's so much of the story that's missing, how can you put the pieces together and get there? And for them, it was the text messages and Lori's own words and demeanor in representing herself in court.
Did she have any valid arguments, like anything that made you think maybe she's not guilty?
Do you want to answer? I can't think of any.
You know, honestly, up until yesterday, I would have said not guilty. But when the prosecutor,
So he just said, up until yesterday, I was a not guilty voter. That doesn't surprise me based on what he said earlier in the interview. So he was not guilty until yesterday, which means I think the jurors pulled him into the guilty camp, discussing maybe the lies when they went back and checked, the stuff that the prosecutor said in closing argument that armed them to go and explain to him how she actually was guilty. He was looking for proof of a conspiracy, which I appreciate. You have to have that in order to convict her, but eventually he got there.
yesterday, I would have said not guilty. But when the prosecutor, I don't know, what do they call that? When they give their
Closing argument?
Yeah.
Argument.
Yes, the closing
Connected
argument,
the
that's
dots.
really there. So a few things she said in there, and when I looked them up today, I was like, oh, yeah, that's bad.
And you were still on the fence yesterday.
I was yesterday. Yes.
Give us a sense of what it was like to be in that jury room. Was there any a point that someone was disagreeing, saying that maybe she is not guilty?
Yes.
Were you guys
There was
all-
a couple.
and what was that like? Walk us through.
There was a couple that thought maybe she was not guilty. And again, this case did not have a mountain of evidence of conspiracy to commit this crime. It was Lori Vallow herself that was her downfall.
It's just a matter of, adults working things out, going through all the evidence and figuring out, what.
And I'm repeating because it's kind of hard to hear some of what they say. It's adults figuring stuff out and working through it. That's exactly what a jury should do.
We thought, what we were going to come to an agreement with.
To learn now that everyone that was in that house that day, minus Daybell, is all not with us anymore, is dead or has been killed. I mean, what is that like to hear as jurors walking out?
Sad. Like I kept wanting to hear from Tylee.
I was going to ask, is anybody wondering why Tylee wasn't testifying?
Yes.
You were.
Did you ever ask the judge why aren't they here? Or
No.
Interesting to me. I would have thought one of the juror questions they wrote would have been like, why don't you call Tylee? Or what did Tylee say about this? Or because they don't know the rules of evidence that's hearsay or can't come in or she's unavailable or why she's not testifying. So that is kind of strange to me that they wouldn't even ask when she seemed like such a vital part of all of this, because they said Alex passed away. So they knew why Alex wasn't testifying. Why did they not ask more about Tylee? That's interesting to me.
And the one witness that really got to me was hearing Kay. I was holding back my emotions.
Kay was the witness for her. All right. So it seemed like we had our finger on the pulse of this jury. The text messages, the Nephi, the Ned, the conspiracy part there, the admissions of we got rid of Ned, and Kay being the witness that really tugged at their heartstrings and swung on Lori Vallow and took her down, metaphorically. How about that? That's so interesting.
One of the biggest factors in your decision today?
One of the biggest factors was probably when we were sitting
Now,
there.
obviously, a third juror, so we're going to get their perspective as well.
Whenever they would ask a question about the Mormon stuff and all that, she would just kind of look at us and smile and smirk. So it kind
We
of
didn't get to see all that, but it doesn't surprise me with how her demeanor was with what we did get to see in here, right? That she was smirking, not taking it that seriously, joking around, acting like she was queen of the courtroom.
gave it away for a lot of it. Just kind of didn't really care.
What were those conversations?
Jurors are going to do that. They're going to look at you as the defendant. And guess what? When you're also the lawyer and all of the things you have to do and say, like being a trial lawyer takes a lot of practice. Everyone has their first trial. It's probably not their best trial. And you learn a lot of these things and mannerisms and how to move and how to talk and how to not sound too invested, but not invested enough or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a balance to everything. And when you're doing it yourself and you're also the defendant and all the eyes are on you, it's tough.
Like in the jury room, I mean, going back and forth when everyone was deliberating. You kind of put us inside that room with you.
Let's see. It was kind of, so a lot of us already knew. A couple of us just needed the extra, we need to re-look back through the evidence, the text messages and all that.
A couple of them already knew it was guilty. No surprise there. I would assume the majority already knew they would vote guilty, but they wanted to go back through everything. That's probably why the, 15, 20 minutes the first day.
So it was a little bit of back and forth, but all of us were pretty sure we already knew what we wanted.
Was there one piece of evidence that really convinced you she was guilty?
Probably when she said that he was Ned before they got rid of him.
It is. The two text messages we thought were the biggest text messages. That's what the jury is quoting. No surprise. And by the way, we thought them and they were probably on top of mind for us because the prosecutor highlighted them. And she highlighted them again in her closing. So we thought her closing was maybe a little long. Did she lose the jury? Did she not? Were they locked in? Like I always say, if a jury's with you, usually you can bring them along, even in a long closing argument. And I think that's exactly what they're telling us. So whether it was the most engaging or, B, C, whatever we grade the Monday morning quarterbacking, myself included, it doesn't matter if you're giving the jury what they need to get a guilty verdict and get justice for that victim. And that's what happened here.
That was probably the part where we were like, okay, now it's real.
Did you ever wonder why Tylee wasn't testifying as a witness?
Yes. We didn't really have much to say about it though, because we didn't really know anything, why she didn't, stuff like that.
And do you understand now that every other witness that was there that day is now dead?
Yes.
When did you learn that?
At the end, when we first were walking out, everyone was talking about it, and we got told to look up her previous stuff. So that
as they're walking out, people are literally telling them, go look up her previous stuff. So, I mean, what a sigh of relief, right? Because we were all talking about what if they voted not guilty and then they went and found out. It's how it's supposed to be. They shouldn't know about it. So I'm glad they're all saying they didn't know about it and they're just finding out about it after their verdict, not before.
You're aware.
And in that jury room, this woman's been convicted of 3 homicides. You guys didn't know that.
We did not.
None of you guys knew that.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
And then hearing all the missing pieces in the trial, the people who didn't testify, you didn't really. There were a lot of holes when you went into the jury room.
Yeah.
Were not explained to you.
Yeah. A lot of holes when you went in the jury room sounds a lot like reasonable doubt, right? And those are things lawyers can highlight and talk about. The connections that weren't there. Is this really enough proof? Lori Vallow, on the other hand, wanted to argue about online dating and, whether or not her beliefs were mainstream Mormon and, what they did on their girls' trip. And she focused on some of the things that weren't as important, and joking and laughing lost the jury.
Yes.
Must have made it more difficult.
It did, which is why we went back through everything just to make sure we didn't miss anything, to make sure that we were 100% on what we were choosing to do.
Was there anything that made you think she might not be guilty?
That was Nate Eaton, I'm not sure, but he stumped this juror.
No.
Nothing. And look at the smirk she's trying to hide. It's like nothing that made you think that she wasn't guilty of this. So it's like everything pointed toward guilt for this juror.
You went back to the deliberation room. Were there any jurors that were uncertain and some that were certain? Where did you start? What was the foundation for deliberations?
I think probably 10 out of 12 of us were certain.
All right, so there's a good number for us. 10 out of 12, not surprising at all. That guy that we just heard from, the older gentleman, he was one of the not guilties, and there was one other somewhere. It did not seem like the female juror that was with the male juror in the first part of the interview. It did not seem like she was a not guilty vote, right? So this juror and that juror were 2 of the 10 guilties, is what it seemed like.
The other 2, we helped them go back to what they needed to learn.
I mean, that's what closing arguments are for. We helped the other jurors go back to what they needed to learn. For anybody who thinks that's inappropriate, that's what you do when you sit back there as jurors. There are jurors arguing, pulling, explaining, trying to convince other jurors. If you're resolute, though, as a juror and you feel you're wrong, you should not be swayed. You should not be pulled. You should not change your vote just to acquiesce to somebody that you don't believe is absolutely true. But like human beings, if you're presented with more information and you change your mind or you make a decision based on that new information, that's totally fine. That's how life works.
Kind of make up their mind. And then, we just kind of went from there.
Did you guys look at any additional evidence once you were back there? Because I know that not all of the evidence was presented in court, and they said there was additional. Lori asked you to watch the entire interview, for example, and
Yes.
Trina K invited you to do the same. Did you guys do any of that?
That was actually one of the first things we did, because what we saw was only clips.
They watched the entire Lori Vallow interview. So did it help or hurt Lori? Because Lori was really pushing it, almost baiting the prosecutor. Prosecutor goes, "We welcome that. Go watch it."
Bits. And going back through it, it was actually kind of the whole interview that was like that. She asked us to watch the whole thing, but the whole thing was pretty much those clippets, other than her laughing, smiling about. She was kind of just at peace. Like, she was just saying.
I was hoping this juror was going to say nonchalant. It's kind of like she was just nonchalant because there was so much of that throughout the trial. But they're like, yeah, we watched it. Didn't do her any favors. And the parts they clipped out were still clipped out because they're hearsay and things Tylee said and things that were inadmissible. So that stuff didn't go back there. So it was clipped. So the juror's probably like, yeah, the prosecutor did not show this out of context. Lori acted like we were going to see some bombshell in here, and we didn't. And again, that's how you lose credibility, not gain it, as a lawyer arguing about a piece of evidence.
Thing where her legs were crossed. She was sitting all the way up on the seat with no shoes on, just her legs were crossed like she was in her own home.
And so they're psychoanalyzing everything, all of her movements, how she sat, how she talked, and that's what they do. So whether it's Karen Reed, Lori Vallow, or anybody else, when you go give interviews, you better believe 12 people you do not know are going to be nitpicking your every move and action and facial expression and tone and words you say and what you're doing between the words that you say and what you're doing, where you're looking when somebody's asking you questions. All of that is important, which is why it's a dangerous game to play, especially if your defense is reasonable doubt or they can't prove it or the investigation was bad or there's not enough here.
You made a big deal out of being called nonchalant or calm throughout the entire trial. Didn't think it was really fair. Was that something that affected you guys, her calmness or nonchalantness?
Yes. Being that calm when everything happened, it's not something that you would normally be calm about.
Duh. That's why it was such a bad call from the jump from Lori. She's like, well, I'm always nonchalant. Well, you don't always show up to your house where your husband's laying on the floor lifeless. Like, we get it. So everybody's got different personalities. Some people are wound tight and type A and do, and that's how they look at everything. And, they're very whatever. And some people are really chill and laid back. But when you put people in those situations, it's very rare they act like Lori Vallow did. And if they do, maybe there's a reason for it.
Expect to be sad, asking how your brother's doing, since he was the one that got injured during it too. She didn't do any of that. She already knew it happened, and she just went with it like that.
Did you want her to testify?
That was also an interesting thing. She wasn't even asking how Alex was doing. This is your BFF brother, Alex, who's there to protect you, and he got hurt saving you and your daughter, and you're not even asking how he is? You're not asking the police, how's Alex doing? Interesting. They're thinking, these jurors, right? And I think these jurors were looking at it and they're looking at the guy like, look, she didn't even care about Alex, making their arguments to pull them into the guilty camp.
I guess, I don't know. Yes, seeing Charles's sister's reaction when they did say she pled guilty was really relieving.
it made all of us feel really good that they got justice.
I don't know what they meant by seeing her plead guilty, but maybe when they saw the guilty verdict, seeing Kay made them feel like it was justice. But also, the jurors like, I don't know. When they asked, did you want Lori to testify? And they're like, I don't know. That's good. Because that shouldn't come into play with your decision, the fact that she didn't testify. And it doesn't seem like this juror held it against her, which is exactly how it's supposed to go.
Your first and last name?
Natasha Smith.
Natasha Smith.
Also known as Tosh Reed Tucker, though.
Tosh Reed Tucker.
Yes.
Can you spell that?
TASS. And then my last name is Reed Tucker, REED-Tucker.
Do you plan to go watch a bunch of stuff about this case now, or?
Yes. I believe we're told that there's a Netflix documentary, and you can basically just Google it. Everything will pop up. So that's probably what I'm going to do when I get home.
I wonder who told them that, right? As they're walking out. It's not like that's not something the court clerk tells you.
Just Google it. Everything will pop up. So that's probably what I'm going to do when I get home.
Yeah. It's like, it is. I mean, some of this does make me feel a little uneasy, like the laughing and like how crazy it is and whatever. And it is true. And sometimes we talk about these things that they're like so abstract, but they're not real people's lives, real people's families. So it is sad, but it is wild. I mean, their jaws are going to drop when they find out everything that's happening in the background of this case.
Yeah,
And you really didn't know anything about this case coming on as a juror?
No, and I told my grandma that I got requested for jury, and she asked if I know anything about it. I told her the name, and her jaw dropped. Like I was supposed to know who she was. Like she thought it was insane that I didn't know what was happening, but I just moved here 2 years ago as of March, so I didn't really know anything to begin with, but my grandma did, and she thought I was just crazy for not knowing.
Where'd you live previously?
Minnesota.
And so your grandmother was able to keep a tight lip on things?
She did, yes, she did.
Fun discussion with
Yeah, and I actually see her tonight too, because my mom just flew in from Minnesota, so I'm gonna go see them after this, and we're probably gonna watch everything.
Oh, that's interesting. And the interviewer kind of saved the juror and is like, but she didn't tell you anything about it, right? She stayed tight-lipped because we know if you got outside influences, that's an appellate issue. So her grandma knew all about the case and was like, how do you not know, but didn't say anything about it? I don't know, man. With these high-profile trials, everything makes me a little uneasy. If I was a lawyer on them, I would just be like, you have to be talking about it, right? I mean, you just have to. If your grandma told you she knows everything about it and you're crazy that you don't, and now everybody's flying in town tonight to watch everything on it, I don't know. That's why you just got to make sure you implore the jury to make sure they know you cannot talk about this. No outside influence, please. Don't do any research. Don't try to become part of this story. You've been picked to do your civic duty, and that's what it is. Oh boy, this is wild. We're living in wild times. Well, let me know what you guys think, what thoughts you had. If we were right, wrong during our analysis and what everybody thought in the chat. Seems like we were pretty in line with a lot of these jurors. If you guys find any other juror interviews, go ahead and send them to me. We'll continue to break it down. If you guys are interested, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe because there's one more Lori Vallow trial coming and we will be following it together. But until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.